Hello and welcome to this next video. And before I start, a short disclaimer. This presentation is provided for and on behalf of Conscious Living Foundation. It is private information for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal, medical, or financial advice. My name is Krahnert. I'm a coach and mentor for transformational processes. So let's get started. The topic for today is what is truth? And I was contemplating and researching while I was putting together this short presentation. So I hope it makes some sense and you can get something out of it. Now, perhaps there are two kinds of truth. One I would call the absolute truth. It is an eternally valid cosmic law of creation. It is at play as a universal order and a reference point. And it is an expression of our primordial ground. So it's arising from beyond time and space, you could say. And then you can say we have relative truth, many truths, actually. And that is based on our individual perception and interpretation of reality, according to one's own worldviews, beliefs, and conditionings. So it's about the mind, the body, and the world. Or in other words, it's a process of thinking and imagining, sensing and feeling, and perceiving. This is how we see and experience reality. When we talk about truth, it's a question of consciousness. And there are two forms how consciousness can experience itself or express itself. One I would call, the truth. It's about the expression of our real or true self. And it's expressing abundance, trust, oneness. There's some keywords. It's based on love, which is a feeling of oneness. It's more than a feeling of oneness, but I'll get into that a little bit later. It's a sense of belonging, and I would call it unconditional love. And on the other hand, we could see the illusion. We could call it the illusion or the ego. Many people call it a separate mind, which is an expression of lack, inadequacy, and a sense of separation. It's based on fear, actually. So it's a feeling of separation, fragmentation, and it's actually conditional love. But if it's conditional love, it's not love at all. It's something totally different. If it's a question of consciousness, I put up here a chart from Ken Wilber with his integral approach, where he postulates that consciousness is expressing itself in four quadrants. On the top right, you can see individual and group, interior, exterior. So individual, interior would be ourself, our own awareness, our own consciousness. And the outside would be the body, the brain, the organism. And group interior, we would call our culture. That's the worldview. And group exterior, you could call it social systems, economics, and the environment. It also expresses itself in states of consciousness. And here we can distinguish between gross states of consciousness, which is our waking state, subtle states of consciousness, which is our dream state, and the causal states of consciousness, which is our deep sleep. It's not really a state of consciousness. This is where we fall back in our true nature. And beyond that, we have the non-dual consciousness as such. And there are stages of development. And through some research with spiral dynamics and Ken Wilber, we can see here there are different levels of development, like An individual as well as humanity is going through levels of development and evolution. So here we can see stages. I go a little bit further into details here on my next slide because I work with the human design system and the gene keys. And here it also relates to energy centers, which have a correlation to levels of consciousness as well. And it's a frequency band, if you want, a band of frequencies. It has a lower band of frequency and a higher levels of frequency. It's all about frequency. There's no judgment there, yeah. And it's about levels of development, levels of evolution, levels of consciousness. Call it the lower level here. It's moving from stress and pressure to a more natural drive, to an evolutionary impulse, from alarm and fear to alertness to pure presence, from a reaction to response to being in the flow, from pure desire to sensing and feeling and serenity and compassion, from an ego to pure willpower, and then finally to the sense of surrender, to self-centered me, to us, to an including all of us, to distortion, to a metamorphosis, to emergence, from anxiety, mental anxiety, to a clear thinking mind, to aware presence, from mental pressure to seeking and non-seeking, to ever-present unlimited awareness. So we can see we have different levels, suppressed forms within those levels, as well as transcended forms within those levels of consciousness. And there are cosmic laws at play, or the play of creation, when we talk about truth, the truth with a capital T, yeah? And it's based on the law of love. I have 9 laws here. The first one is the main important one. It's the law of love. It's a cause for all creation. And it's not a feeling or sensing feeling from an individual. It's what the Course in Miracles calls it, the opposite of love is fear, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. So it's an all-encompassing force for using a word. It's beyond the force. So this cause for all creation, which we call love, is all-encompassing. There's nothing outside of this. The second law, it's the law of involution and evolution. It's an moving inwards towards source and moving out towards creation, like breathing in and breathing out, involution, evolution. It's a cosmic law. The same as the law of polarity, plus and minus, yin and yang, male and female. The law of rhythms and cycles, seasons, summer, winter, spring, fall. Cycles, right? Our heartbeat, our breathing, their rhythms, cycles, naturally. The law of resonance is like frequencies attract like frequencies. The law of balance and harmony, like the attraction of the zero field, equilibrium. It's always a pull towards an equilibrium. The law of cause and effect. For every action, there's a reaction. The law of correspondence, I forgot. As above, so below. Microcosmos, macrocosmos. It's all mirroring, it's all the same. The law of numbers or sacred geometry. They're controlling patterns, controlling creative patterns. It's throughout the whole cosmos. So the laws 2 to 9 express in a differentiated way the one principle of love within the play of duality or polarity. Let's go back to states of consciousness. Where's our focus? Where's our main focus of attention? I mentioned before that we have a gross state of consciousness, our waking state. It's a one-dimensional. It's very materialistic, atheistic, and these days, the loss of meaning. When we fall asleep, we fall into a dream state, which is subtle state. It's more multi-dimensional. And when we go to deep sleep, it's a causal, a non-dimensional state. Let's call it the one mind even. So worldviews or belief systems serve as a point of reference when we view and interpret multi-dimensional reality. So when we talk about truth, we have to include states and stages of consciousness. Have a look at from that point of view. So I mentioned one-dimensional worldview, and here I put together some key words. I like that family is sitting there on the couch, and it's a reflection of what mostly happens these days in our societies. We have norms in our society, norms based on rewards, punishment, but also traumatization. We see a lot of violence, verbally, mentally, emotionally, physically. There's a lack of real knowledge. There's disinformation, distraction, lack and poverty. We all are asked to behave in a certain way. The school system is an indoctrination system, really. We are bound by acts and statutes. There are certain taboos, rules based on fear. We have bans and commandments. There's an enormous economic and social pressure, limited beliefs and worldviews. That's a one-dimensional worldview, which we as individual beings consider as the truth. But is it really the truth? Or is it only a narrow focus on what we believe the truth is or reality is? Talked about information before. Let's have a look at 3 forms of information we are bombarded with every day. First, let's go back to one-dimensional or purely materialistic source of information, which is based on meaninglessness. It's atheistic and science-based, science as the new religion. You know, everything is coincidence. There's no real cause, based on chaos, ego, separate mind, the self-organizing principle of matter, like, you know, the brain creates consciousness. Really? Right now, we can witness the technocracy that is rising, the one-dimensional information is talking about the transitoriness of human life and human as an end product of a linear evolution. It's rational and horizontal thinking. Now, multidimensional forms of information go from fine to ultra-fine information. And it's a lot wider, a lot deeper, a lot more in there. It's expressing the multidimensionality of the cosmos and order within natural laws. It's about rhythms and cycles, higher dimensions of worlds and even entities. So it's a more intuitive and a more vertical thinking. And we have non-dimensional information, and it talks about the absolute truth, which really cannot be put into words. It's about eternal and absolute truth beyond material polarities. It's the material illusion of forms as a spontaneous crystallization of spiritual reality. That's what we could call truth as well, I guess. So consciousness is really the origin of life, and it has meaning. There's the plan behind. Let's call it love. It's about knowing being, and it's about knowing the I am present, which is unlimited, ever-present awareness. See the difference here? There are also 3 ways of thought manipulation. Let's have a look at that. There's input and output control. These days, the sensory input determines the mental flow, and the truth of an individual depends on what's coming in, the information that's coming in. But what I see and what I sense is a complete withholding of uncomfortable information. There's an oversaturation with useless and meaningless information. Find that out for yourself. They even create an information overload. I use the word they, I mean, for a better word, the system, reality. There's a targeted false information and disinformation quite clearly. Just turn on your television and listen wholeheartedly. And a constant repetition of false information. For example, the 9/11 story. I mean, yeah, I don't have to say much about this. And the so-called pandemic. I don't need to talk about this in this video as well. It's a whole topic for itself. And the output control. So scientific and historical truth are established by the so-called experts, the new priests. And mostly these days, they are sitting in the medical arena. So, and here you're not allowed to ask uncomfortable questions concerning state-imposed truths or to publicly criticize certain predetermined narratives, because that would lead to persecution of people with an opinion opposing the state's prescribed opinion or narrative. And it can lead to defaming or defamation of people with different views. You know, they call them conspiracy theorists, right-wing or left-wing radicalist, cultists, charlatans, you know, the C-word deniers, and so on. So they control the output as well as the input. There's the word they again. And they control even the way we identify ourselves. So they're controlling our self-worth and our dependency based on what we use, what we own or consume on a daily basis, you know, like our clothes, our social status, our income, ownership of house and car and things, you know, and we derive a sense of self from that material worldview. And this is creating actually an artificial consumer desire through mainly the mass media. And the conclusion is here that unfortunately, today most people live in survival mode. The mind only looks for strategies to satisfy the artificial created consumer desires through the acquisition of status symbols, the house, the car, the vacation, the job, and so on, the relationships, the recognitions. Well, then there's only a little time and the capacity to contemplate important questions like, who am I? Why am I here? What's going on? What's the purpose of my life? And even how can I live a fulfilled and happy life? By constantly running after those material things? Well, something to contemplate. So factors that determines our views is our self-views. It's a mental concept, is based on concepts and beliefs. The worldview is largely a perceptual view. We have our perceptual filters, also based on our conditioning, schooling, studies, the knowledge we have accumulated, you know, our life paths, our experiences. But also on the other side, our DNA activation, gender, circumstances, upbringing, the society we're living. It's all determining the way we see the world. And there's an inner view as well. It's more emotional, more sensing and feeling. It's based on morals and values. So all those things, self-view, worldview, inner view, determine how we think and talk about truth. How about we list some futures for the truth-finding process? How about we expand and refine our own thinking, our sensing and perceiving? Paying attention to our inner sensations and feelings, not so much what's going on between the ears. How about we widening our awareness through a more integrated experience, or the continuous expanding of our worldview, which can lead to the dissolution of irrational fears, because most of the fears are totally irrational, because we follow some narrative. How about increasing our trust in the order of creation, which then in turn would lead to a sense of inner peace? Trust. Can we trust? We need to clean up our own shadow aspects. We need to grow up and really embrace our own potential and who we truly are. And then we need to show up. And this showing up is an expression of our divine essence. I've written here shadow, potential, and city. They are keywords from the Gene Keys. We need to deprogram our victim attitude, this constant blaming and complaining. Be mindful. Every time you complain about something, every time you blame something or somebody, that's victim state. We need to learn to deprogram our victim state. We need to learn to stand as living being with sovereign integrity. This is a whole topic by itself. What does it mean, sovereign integrity? These days, we need to establish strong connections and communities. We need to come together. There's division and segregation happening all over the world. We need not to allow this. We need to come together because we are one. And only when we come together, we are strong. We need to cultivate loving kindness, compassion, and our own authenticity in our everyday life. So finding your own truth, you need to learn to ask questions every time. Don't believe everything you hear and see. Don't believe your own stories. Ask for evidence. Is this really true, what I'm hearing? Find answers within yourself. Self-inquiry is the path to do that. And find out who benefits most. When you hear something, who benefits? And test new information with your own conscious and your own inner feeling. Trust your intuition as well as common sense. Let's go back to common sense. Navigate according to natural and timeless cosmic and natural laws. You need to go back to natural rhythms and laws. More analog rather than digital living. We need to learn to grasp larger context instead of only getting lost in unimportant details or only focusing on the details, the little things. We need to cultivate a sense of harmony and coherence. And remember, the opposite is mostly true. When anyone tells you, do the opposite, especially our government. Because our world is mirrored. Everything is turned upside down. Truth is the lie and lie is the truth. Eliminate artificial and manipulative information fields and mass information. Be proactive and create instead of only passively and uncritically consuming. Permanently acquire new insights and information. A lot of learning to do. It takes self-responsibility, a sense of trust and courage, an inquisitive mindset. And cultivate life-affirming values like kindness, trust, truth, honesty, patience, faith in oneself, justice, discipline. Only a few keywords. So we can distinguish, let's say, two mindsets in a living being. One is based on a separate self or the ego. And the other one is more based on an open mind or pure consciousness. One would be called wrong-mindedness and one right-mindedness. There are two words from A Course in Miracles. There's nothing right or wrong about it. It's just an expression of either consciousness, pure consciousness, or the ego, fear or love, oneness or separation, which then, of course, forms, let's call it a lie. And anything that is a lie, it is only service to oneself. It's based on vanity and pride, anger, revenge, cruelty, greed, lust, desire, need for power and control, deception, misguidance, confusion, attachments, illusions, envy, guilt, laziness, indifference. You could call it the lie or untruth. And it's not expressing love, right? It's expressing fear. So truth, when anything you hear about something about love and compassion, self-discipline, patience, right and justice, or someone speaking authentic, because words have power. It's about honesty and conscious service to others, trust and mindfulness. They're expressions of the truth, the truth. So we can see that the ego or fear or the lie is in the foreground of experience when our essence or the truth or love is overlooked in the background of our experience. And through mindfulness, we can become the observing presence again and let ourselves sink back into our true essence. It's all about our attention. Where's our focus of our attention? So wrong-mindedness is so that there's nothing wrong about when ego and fear and the lie is in the foreground of your experience. It's just the focus is a little bit out. Okay. Okay, that was it. I hope that makes sense. If you want, I invite you to weekly live online meetings, conscious conversations, contemplation, Q&A session to explore the nature of consciousness, awakening, and solutions to navigating times of change. Every Tuesday from 7 to 8. Please register. You can go on my website, wolfkrahnert.com/events. You can also support my work on Patreon. So there's patreon.com/Wolf Krahnert. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. Remember, be now here, be the knowing presence, and connect to your own peace and happiness. Thank you and bye for now.